Good morning, everybody. It's Monday again, and I'm Tina Frank, and I'm here with Bonnie Violet, and we're Splintered Grace.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's great to see you all again this week. Your turn.
Yeah. So here we go. It's Monday for all of us, obviously. So, hey, hope everyone's having fun this morning. Duane and I have been talking through the week, and it dawned on us that not only us, but there's a lot of folks in our circle of influence that have had church hurt. So we thought we'd spend some time this week talking about, I don't know, all kinds of church hurt. We really would like you guys to correspond with us. We'd love to answer questions. We are both going to share a little bit about some of the things we've experienced, positive and negative at the church. And we also want to be able to answer questions that you guys might have about whatever it is. So anyway, Duane, you want to start us off by sharing a little bit about a church experience that you had, positive or negative?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I feel like there's so many stories. The good, the bad, and the good, the bad, and the ugly. A few weeks back, Rocky had asked the question about like, what could churches do like better, or what would a church need to do in order to like make me feel safe there, or whatever. And so it kind of sparked up a little bit of that conversation as well. So I guess for me, I don't know. I was like, I feel more drawn to talking about that initially. Is just kind of like the good, the better stuff, I guess. Cause I think part of it is
great.
For me, it's like, I've had the church hurt. I think it's important to recognize that it's there. And I don't think the question of whether or not church hurts us is like up for debate. I think most people can agree that they've been hurt by church in some way. And I think the biggest part then is like, so then, well, what do I do about that? Like what do I do with that hurt? Because I think just like any hurt or any pain, if we don't like transform it or heal it, we will transmit it. And so I think for me, it's like, how do I navigate being in a space that could potentially hurt me, especially a spiritual space? So I guess one thing that could help that for me that I would like to share is that kind of like what allowed me to get to go to church again. Prior to meeting you, reconnecting with you.
I was going to say, wait a second, you've known me for a long time.
Right. Prior to us reconnecting and building our relationship, I had landed in a church in Chicago, and I had actually ended there by accident. I had been very unwilling to go to church for many years. I'd been sober at that time. I was a few years sober. So I did have a spirituality in my life, and I was wanting to kind of like, I was seeking God in my life and spirituality. But I never would have thought of going to church for that. I had come to see that a higher power that was helping me sober was not that God. And so I ended up going to this church service and for work and I got there late. I think they kind of set it up that way, but they weren't allowed to meet with me until after the church service. But I was already there because I was looking to set up an HIV testing site. So I had to sit through the service, and I sat next to this woman and I sat through the service, and the pastor was this gay drug addict pastor, and he was just sharing his story, and I just was like, I felt like I was bawling, like I was uncontrollably bawling like the whole time, and I was trying to keep it cool because I was like, this person doesn't know me, but I just couldn't help it because I felt like it was kind of that moment we talked about last week where it felt like, that woman who showed up was like a message, right? And it just felt like one of those moments again. It's like, why? I'm not supposed to be here. Why am I here? But I'm here, and this is like just for me. It might not have been, but it felt like just for me.
Yeah.
And I eventually, like, I found myself there the next week, and the next week, and the next week. And it was something I just started doing really religiously, so to speak, as far as I kept showing up every week, and I cried almost, I felt like I cried forever. but it was such a healing experience because at that time I was fully embracing my sexuality and my queerness and even just my history with addiction and so many things. And those were all the things that I didn't think I could take into church with me, and take into like a Christian church with me.
Yeah.
And I got to, and it was not only just that like I was there, but like they liked that I was there, and they brought me into being involved with things there. Like I would do the liturgy, and I would help with communion eventually, and they would train me to be a chaplain, which is what was really big into me, even starting doing queer chaplain work. And that stuff was really difficult for me, but it was really like it's what I needed in order to heal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And so they kind of provided that space for me in which they just allowed me to be who and how I was.
Yeah.
And not in a way in like, oh, like, I don't know, like, we're glad you're here. Like, you could really use us. It was, it was
Yeah,
more of like,
I know.
and the cool thing is it wasn't, I think for me, because my healing trauma was Christian, I think it was important for me to find a Christian space. And I think it was also important because I grew up in the churches that I did in the ways that I did. They were full of straight people, and like just it wasn't just like a space for only gay people to be Christian.
Right.
And so it added like a validity, I think, or like something that I don't know, it was just something that made it feel authentic to what I grew up with, just a little bit more evolved. So it didn't feel like it was like this separate thing that was created just for me. It felt like it was the same thing in which I could just exist in. And it was so healing.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that's interesting that you pointed out that it was something that sounded or felt familiar to you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the first healing steps is finding a place that you can find some familiarity so that you can move from there. And because I think that's just human nature. We go back to that spot where we lost track or lost sight of, or even got hurt or had an amazing experience from. And if we can get back to that point, I think that you're right. The healing can start in that space, and it causes an opportunity for us to start to move forward. So it sounds like you found a beautiful community there.
Yeah, I did. And one of the things I wanted to add to that too is, like when I was talking about like I had reached a point in my life where like I knew I needed that, and I needed to be there so that I could heal and like get better from like the trauma and the hurt that I experienced. But then I saw people like straight people or non-queer people, and I'm like, why are you here? Like my thought is like, what did church ever do to you? Or like, why would you like, so there was like kind of this, which was really great. But I realized also that like, not only people like me get hurt by church, like you've been hurt by church. Can you share a little bit of that with us?
Yeah. I'd have to say a lot of people that I know have been hurt by church at some level. For me, I shared in the previously that I stepped out away from church and started doing things on my own in my own strength, and that the church wouldn't approve of, based on what I was raised and what I believed church was supposed to be. And so I just didn't engage. But when I tried to engage, I didn't find the same experience that you did. So my first time that I struggled and I got church hurt was I was in a large church, and I'm a single parent with 4 beautiful girls, and I just really needed a connection point. I knew that I needed to be in church. I needed some help, just people around me, because I didn't have a whole lot of friends. Life was just superficial. It was empty. And I'm like, okay, the only place I know where I've been fulfilled ever in my life was when I was in church. And that was in Wendell. So I went back to a church, and I got involved a little bit, started going and doing a few things. My girls were struggling because we had been out of church for so long. They weren't sure what they wanted to do. It was a typical scenario where they went with me because that's what we were doing. And I was in a meeting one night. It was a small group that met inside the church. And this is going to sound horrible. You're all going to have horrible thoughts about me. So just know up in front, you're going to go, she deserved that.
It's all good. This is a safe space.
I was investing, and I just wanted a place where I could be real. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever struggled with that, but sometimes I feel like when I go into a space, there's a certain level of expectancy as to how I need to be around people or what they want to see from me. And I just needed a place to be real. So I came out of the church setting into the small group setting, within the church community. And this is, I don't know, we'd been meeting together for 4 or 5 weeks, and it was a singles group because I was a single person at that time. So long story short, everyone was sharing their, I don't know if it was under the prayer request guys or under what they were talking about, but every person in that circle was having a crybaby moment, is what I called it. They were crying and someone needs to help me. I don't understand why this is happening to me. Da 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 da. Going on and on and on, around and around and around the circle. By the time it got over to me, I was so frustrated. I just couldn't even. I stood up and I said, "You know what? I don't know what all you guys' problem is. You just need to suck it up and figure it out." And so they asked me to leave and to not come back on the small group, but to come back not ever to church. So I kind of asked for it, I guess, but we got to remember that we're all broken.
Yeah.
And we're all not gonna hit the cookie cutter stereotype of what people think we should be. And I'm not angry at that church. I mean, I don't know what I would have done trying to lead a group of people who are broken and have someone stand up and act ridiculous the way I did.
Well,
but it was hard to overcome.
Well, I mean, I think this makes me think, like the idea about church, like, is that it serves a need. It sounds like one of the things that I thought about was like, maybe you didn't go to church maybe you needed to go to church to feel uplifted, and you were like not getting that, and you were like frustrated about it. I mean, that's the thing that I can remind myself is like, sometimes I'll show up places kind of like being in that spot where it's like, actually, no, like I kind of need my spirit lifted right now. And so this is the place I go for that. And then if I go for that and it's not that way, then I can be really upset. So I think it's important to kind of be able to discern, like in some ways, maybe that was a gift for them to say, you know what, don't come back because you weren't getting what you needed. And there was something, maybe there was another space or another place that you could really get fed or connect differently. Better.
Absolutely. So like I said, I've harbored no ill will towards those guys. I was
did you for a little while though?
I did. Yeah. I was upset for a while, and it affected my kids also. So I was very upset about that. And so my first thought was to retract. And then I had to remember, in that point, I was in a place where I needed uplifting. I needed someone to speak life to me. I needed someone to come alongside me. And I was just really pretty abrasive. So one thing I had to learn, and I only was able to learn that as I sought the Word of God on my own, because I didn't know what else to do. So I was not ready to go back into another church. But I realized that people are the church. The organization that we call church is just a gathering point, but we as individuals are the church. And so all of these people in that particular instance were hurting, so they all needed uplifting. So they didn't need me yelling and screaming at them. And that the person there was also trying to allow them an opportunity to receive what they needed. Right. But we have to remember that we're all broken, and when broken people come together, people get hurt sometimes.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's one of my instances.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge, thanks everyone who's joined us this morning. Hello to Kathy and Christine and Kelly and Phyllis. We do see you all there, and just wanted to say hello right quick. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that, like, so did you ever think about not being a Christian after that?
No. I never did. Because I went back.
Like,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just knew. I remember that day I got saved in that little church, and I knew that there was something real that happened to me, and I just couldn't walk away from it, no matter what.
Yeah.
So
So you just
no,
kept going?
I did. Well, I didn't keep going to churches.
Mm.
Um, I retracted as far as finding a church community. And there's a role for the church community. So I retracted from that, and I decided to start listening and watching things on television or the radio or whatever. K-Love was a big, because my radio station, it would help me out listening to some music. I wasn't big on technology, so I didn't have a computer and all that stuff to go look to. So I found a few televangelists that I listened to on the TV at certain times of the day, that I started that to I don't know, just to be fed and engage. And it's amazing because once I realized that I had value and that things didn't have to be hard, that I could control some of the things around me by my response to the world around me, it was just an amazing transformation. And then when I started applying the Word of God, it just got even better.
Yeah. One of the things that came to mind to me is I remember when I was a kid, and I don't remember if I shared it on the show or not or whatever, because I feel like it's a story I've shared all the time, but it was a very pivotal time in me understanding my spirituality, I guess, or that people can experience God or religion or whatever differently. And that was like a conversation I had with my mom. I remember coming home from church one day and I was just devastated. I was like crying. I was really upset. And I was just talking. And my mom was like, "What is wrong with you? Like, why are you crying?" And I was just like so conflicted because my parents were good people. They were very kind, very loving, like some of the
Yes,
best people that I knew. And from what I learned in Sunday school that day, they were going to hell because they hadn't asked God to be their Lord and Savior, or they didn't go to church, or, like whatever. And I was just so upset. My mom was like, "What is going on with you?" I was like, I don't think you guys should go to hell. I'm so sad about it.
Oh,
And she's like, "What? Like, why would I go to hell?" And I was like, "Well, because you don't have a relationship with God and you don't go to church." And she's like, "Well, how do you know I don't have a relationship with God? Maybe I don't go to church, but how do you know I don't have a relationship with God, or I don't have some sort of, spirituality?" And I remember I just kind of like stopped crying and was kind of like, "Oh, okay. I don't know if I really like, I don't know. It just kind of sparked something in me that maybe something is different." And,
yeah.
and I've had a lot of different, I think like you did, it's like, okay, if I can't get it here or it's not working here because, people suck and also people are great, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just kind of how it works. But for me, whenever people fail me, that's where that's where God comes into play for me.
Right. Me too.
Yeah.
I
It's
just want to say one
uh-huh.
clarification. There's a difference between um, having Jesus as your Lord and Savior and going to a church.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, but yeah, I'm with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, I don't want to put those in the same
Right.
category.
There's a lot of different experiences for sure, but definitely at that like point in my mind, everything was very black and white,
Yeah,
and this was
yeah,
like this and this, and and so yeah, it's definitely not necessarily that way for a lot of folks. Some folks may choose for that's how their spirituality or their relationship with God or Jesus plays out, but maybe not for everybody.
yeah. But going to church, you mean, right?
Yeah, going to
Yeah,
church, or any of that, or even
yeah,
like what your relationship is with how your
yeah,
relationship plays out with God.
yeah.
um and I know for me, like I don't necessarily I don't identify with any specific like religion or dogma personally. For so long I was very against, I mentioned earlier that like the higher power concept or the spirituality that I utilized to get sober was different than like this spirituality or God in church. For me now, those are integrated. Like I can have my concept of God, whatever, actually exists wherever I go. Whether that happens to be a church, whether that happens to be a bar, whether that happens to be at a festival, whether it happens to be at home or like whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to say that it's like, it's not necessarily like for me, I'm still like, I'm not, I don't know. I guess I don't really subscribe potentially. Like church isn't necessarily like, I do spend time in church now. I like to go to church, but I also like to participate in other I go meditate with the Buddhists, and I will go to different sort of religious and spiritual kind of experiences that maybe aren't like my own. I love like connecting. I don't know. I just love how people commune with what I would call God. But I realize that other people might, from my point of view, they might experience it differently, call it different names, get with different groups of people. But to me, it kind of seems all the same, for me at least.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So for me, church is a big part of my life. I love the community of church. And once I made church personal, meaning understanding that I represent the church, I, in essence, am the church. I mean, this building can do nothing for anybody but harbor them from the weather. I have the ability to speak life or to speak death in someone else. So once I decided that I wanted to be the church, and that was secondary after my commitment to the Lord, was to choose to be a part of the church. And I think it's very important. One, I love being around like-minded people like yourself. People who definitely are pursuing all they can be, pursuing the will of God and their purpose that they were created. A place where I can go and can be genuine. I understand what genuine looks like, and it has to not look like that just for me, but for everybody. Before, it was just all about me. So now I understand that I can get to go and I can just be me. I love also that it's a place where I can be held accountable for things that are yet to be developed in me that God could potentially pull out of me. I'm a firm believer, and I say this every week, I think, that God wants to do more than I can even imagine with my life. And if I don't allow myself to change continually, then I'm never going to get there. Right. So I allow myself to go into the community, the broken community called the church, taking on my responsibility as the church and allowing people to not only guide me, speak into my life. I won't allow them to condemn me, because that's not of God. And I'm grateful now that I can understand the difference, and to be able to be in a place where now I can move forward. I'll just share one more thing. The church I'm connected to right now, our motto is that we're better together. And I love that, because sometimes there's a need that I'll know of that's in my community. And I love that I can call anyone in my community, my church community, and we can conquer that together. And I love that. And I don't think I would have that outside of that church. I love the opportunity to use my gifts and talents to serve the community around me. And I think my local church offers that to me.
Yeah. So. And I'm like, I mean, I go to like with the way shelter in place is now, and like everything's virtual. I actually like pop in and out 4 or 5 different church services every month. Awesome? So like I'm totally a church going girl, but like I also I feel like a lot of, like you said, like if we are the church as people, like if we are instruments of God, if we are spiritual beings, or if we are instruments, of the divine, I feel like for me, I'm like, I do that out in the world. Like I don't do that by sitting in a building waiting for people to come to me. Right. There's a space for that. And that, like, for me, that's where I get fed, but it's not necessarily where I don't know. I just feel like going outside of that and being, like being a spiritual person is kind of where like I don't know, where the rubber hits the road.
Rubber hits the road. Yeah. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. That's where the journey begins. I think I think it's like, we can live in our little spiritual worlds and our spiritual lives and just feel like, okay, like, and kind of feel safe and protected from the world. But that's not what we're meant for.
I agree with you.
And so it's like, at some point we have to find a way to, I think, be both spiritual as well as like in and up, like in the world as well.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Someone said, I'm sure it was one of those televangelists that I was watching for all that time, but it landed, and sometimes it just lands and it sticks. So this stuck,
Mhm.
that we don't ever want to become so spiritually minded that we are no earthly good. And
Mm.
I think what you just said says that exactly. We don't want to be so caught up in our church gathering or our church community. We don't want to be so caught up in the things of God that we can't be useful in the community where we serve. We
Right.
don't, I'm not quarantined like you are as much. I live in Arizona. I don't know how Arizona's standing right now. I've heard that we're not allowed to go anywhere or do some things. I don't know. I don't leave Arizona very
Right.
often. But I love being involved in my community, not just my church community. We are active in all of the local governments here, the school boards here, the community development stuff. So we're active in our community, and like you, I agree with you. I go back on Sundays so that I can be fed and be strengthened and encouraged
Right.
by my local community, so that I can go out there and be kind. My whole goal in life is to be kind and loving to the people around me, no matter what.
Right. Well, and I think that's part of like, I mean, I think a big part of my like, like I need to give what's been given to me in order
Yeah,
for me to keep it. Right. I mean, that's my
yeah,
feeling is
I
like,
agree.
it's kind of like a sacred economy, if you will. So it's like, because I've been blessed and because I get to have this experience with God and with life and myself in a way that is different from what I used to, then
Hmm.
I get to like transmit that to other people as well. And that's
Yeah,
almost like I want to do that because I feel so like I did nothing. I did nothing
mm.
to get those sort of blessings and to have this sort of experience that I have. And so like other than just kind of showing up.
Yeah,
And so, but I think it's also important too because in getting in recovery, and I think this might be like, it's not necessarily a criticism, but I think this can happen in churches. It can happen in a lot of spaces that kind of help us around difficult times or connecting with
hmm,
community. Is I feel like sometimes it can only take you so far. Like you're going to hear the same messages, or you're going to hear the same stories, or you're going to see the same people, and I feel like it only takes you so far. And then like, and I don't think most things are meant to be your like one all in all. Like like to build on it. Like for me, being a person in recovery who goes to 12-step programs, like I cannot just go to 12-step programs and get everything that I need to
mm.
like to grow and expand in life.
Yeah,
However, I have needed it as a foundation and something to kind of hold me until I could get to that space. And it's
yeah,
also something that I can still fall into whenever I need to.
yeah,
And it's a place that I can go and be of service as well to people who, who are not as far as long maybe as am, and be able to help them through that process, to be
yeah,
seen
yeah.
in those spaces as well.
I agree. That's how for me, that's how I see the church. It's a place where I can go, I can get support, I can be taught things. But you're right. If I'm going to go to the next level or go to be who God's called me to be, then I need to do some of that on my own. It needs to not be one stop during the week that I do, and then the rest of the week I do what I want and come back. It's got to be something that I'm committed to. I'm a woman of faith. I spend a lot of time um, with Jesus, for lack of a better way to say it. I like to read my Bible. I like to understand the history. I like to understand what it says the future looks like. I study that personally on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I also engage in conversation. You and I have had conversations about different things that in the Bible and about the Bible. And when I enjoy having those conversations because those help me to grow and to be better. The church conversation that I have once a week or twice a week when I go to church is just like you said, a good baseline. It's a good baseline. It's a direction potentially. It's a guidance point, but it's not the everything that I need. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a place where I need to start from and grow from there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's also might be important when thinking about like if you're in a church or you're a part of a community or a group in which you feel like you're not getting what you need, or you almost feel like you're getting hurt by them, or you're kind of having a bad experience with them. I think part of that um also might be kind of like, well, then how do I know for me, like sometimes I've used that plenty of times as like an excuse not to join. So like I am a serial non-joiner. Like I like to taste a little this, to taste a little that, and just kind of dip in and dip out. That also leaves me feeling very alone at times, very disconnected, and I have a hard time just joining. And what I do is I'll see something wrong or see something not quite right or not quite in full alignment with me, and I'll be like, I'm done with you. And the truth of it is that I don't think there's any space that exists that I will be completely satisfied with and feel like it is in complete alignment with me. And sometimes we just have to be able to meet at some sameness and like not and for let go of the rest. And I think it, like you don't have to subscribe to every part of something in order to still participate. There are probably some key elements or core elements, that if you're not participating in, then you might be like, well, is this really the space that I'm in? But just because there's like one little thing here or there that's different, maybe not be, it might be something not worth running away from. Like, are you running away from something? Or I don't know. I think that's that takes a little bit of reflection, is really kind of figuring out that for yourself.
Yeah. I think that's great wisdom. Same. I agree with everything that you just said.
Well, and just to like not to be so vague, I guess what comes to mind out of an experience. Like, so when a lot of folks, just like a lot of queer folks, drug addicts, people who thought they haven't had access to spirituality or God or that sort of thing because of who they are or what they've done or what they haven't done. Right. But with like 12-step recovery in particular, it is a spiritual program. So there is some sort of like want to kind of have a spiritual experience and to potentially connect with God or what have you, higher power, however way you form that, you get to do that in the program. Yeah. But like, there are some things about the program that are still very like kind of Christian. And some people who aren't Christian, because the space isn't meant to be Christian, it's meant to be for all walks of life, to get sober and just really to get sober. And in a lot of communities, the Lord's Prayer can be a very triggering and kind of hurtful thing to hear, because it was, it reminds them of an experience that they've had in the past. And so it was really hard for people. And I was one of those people too, that I didn't want to sit through holding the hands of everybody in the room and saying the Lord's Prayer afterwards. And I kind of had a resentment over it. But eventually what it came down to was like, I just had to realize I'm holding hands with like 20 other people who are just trying not to use drugs or drink today. They're just trying to like be a little bit better, be a little bit more, hopefully honest, and like just being better, being well. So what the fuck does it matter? Like, if I believe in every little word that's being said in this prayer right now, this isn't about the words. This is about us being connected and us like helping and being with one another to get to have a better experience with the world and to be better, I think, better people. A lot of recovery isn't about, it's not bad people trying to be good. We are sick people. We're sick people trying to be well, Yeah,
you're exactly right. You're exactly right. The church, the gathering together, the church has always been a place of healing. And in healing physically, healing spiritually, it should be a place of healing. Unfortunately, when humans are involved, sometimes that gets lost in people's attitudes, perceptions, ideas of what they think is right or wrong. I've got to say that I've experienced hurt inside the church and outside the church. Drastic hurt on both sides, and I was like, oh, how could this happen to me inside the church? Well, why would I think it wouldn't happen inside the church? There's people inside the church, just like there's people outside the church. And we're all just pursuing God. at different levels. Some people outside the church, maybe not. Those people inside the church, most of them have made a commitment to do that. And so I really had to learn over the years. And I'm sure you have too, Duane, because we both matured to a point where we can have these conversations. We just had to realize that people are people, and we have to choose every single day to not be offended. And we need to not hold accountability or even I don't know what, preconceived idea of people just because of the title that they wear. I'm so categorized all the time because I'm a Christian.
Right.
Before I'm even talked to. I'm sure you experienced that too.
Yeah.
Maybe not
about being a Christian.
Yeah, what I'm saying. Yeah. You fall into categories too.
Well, yeah.
And I think it's time for us to take a step out of these categories and really walk in love. I don't know how else to say it. And choose no matter what's going to fly at you, because you're always going to have stuff flying at you from the church, outside the church, from your family, outside the family. It's going to fly at you. You just got to decide, okay, I'm not going to be offended. I'm just not going to be offended today.
Right.
And I'm just going to move forward. And tomorrow do the same thing, and the next day and the next day.
Yeah. In my circles, in my circles, me being spiritual is like weird, so
I can imagine.
I was promoting dragon spirituality, a series of interviews I did last year, and I was on the streets in the neighborhood, and I was like,
did you say neighborhood?
Yeah, the neighborhood, the neighborhood that's gay.
I've never heard that before. I'm sorry. I'm just like,
no, that's okay. And so I was like, I have this event tomorrow. Would you? It's a drag, and they're like, yay, drag and spirituality. They're like, oh no, I'm good. they're like, no, I'm good. So like being a spiritual and queer person is almost, it's just kind of the opposite of like, it doesn't seem like they two exist, and that's not true. And that's a lot of why I do the work that I do, or why I feel really passionate about talking about and existing as a queer, visibly queer, trans, sometimes in drag person who also is spiritual, to show people that it does exist. Because I think that I've lived in some really dark times in my life in which I did not access God or a higher power in a way that I could have. I found different ways. I found it through drugs. I found it through dancing. I found it through sex. I found it through a lot of different things, only because it was like a substitute for something I thought I couldn't have anymore. And, I don't regret, I'm grateful for the experiences that I have, but I just feel like I could have, because life still happens. Shitty things still happen, and life is still hard. But when I can access God or higher power, or maybe hope to think that maybe there's something else good at play, even if I can't see it, it just helps me stand a little taller and walk a little more, move forward when those things happen. I don't know that I don't know. I lived in so much darkness, or I lived in so much running from that. That's mostly what I was doing, was running from the dark, pretending everything was all roses and there weren't any whatever. And that just wasn't helpful either. It's what I had to do to survive, but what different experience with life would I have if I didn't spend so much of my time running? Running from who I am.
Yeah. And we need to not be running from who we are. We need to remember that we were created and designed perfectly for a purpose.
Yeah.
For a purpose.
I think the other thing that I've learned too is that, if something isn't, I think it is important. I think so some of the people watching this might be people who are in some sort of power or some sort of position within a spiritual setting, whether it's a church or what have you, and kind of being aware of how some of these things might impact people who are coming into your community who you would maybe might be things to think about. It's how do I, and for people like myself who want to exist in these institutions and establishments, is we can be a part of that change. It might not be a big deal to change the decor a little bit, because somebody might be a little bit more willing to come in, because it's I think if we made like in 12-step recovery, they have this concept where it's all about the newcomer. So it's all about the person who is new coming into church, and maybe church has the same thing. It's like you're setting up a space for new people to come in and to have a good experience. It's not about, Barbara, who's been going here for 20 years. She's important and she matters. But like if Barbara is upset about, I don't know, the time that we do church service, but there's 20 other people that will come through the door that couldn't, maybe we should consider that. And maybe that was just a poor random example I pulled out of my head.
It's all good.
Barbara matters too, but I mean, just like there might just be some like small things that could be done that could just create more space. I think also having people who are visibly, like, I think the fact that I was able to be visibly queer and like MC, or like I spoke and I did testimony in drag like a few weeks ago at a church, like those sorts of things are ways to signal to your community that we see you, we love you, and you're welcome here. Because so many times you don't see the people, you don't see women, you don't see people of color, you don't see maybe however way you feel alienated from that group. So I think part of that too is like being able to like take responsibility and changing some of those spaces that can be changed, Yeah,
I think you're right. I think having those, and I say Sunday morning gatherings because those are usually the times when people want to come into a church building, come in and see and experience. I think they should be all about the newcomer, the person who may or may not have a relationship with Jesus, the person who may have a need, maybe just needs community. I think that's definitely what the church should be considering to make those changes to target those. That's always been my position. So I think that's great wisdom.
And it's an interesting balance because I think you still need to make Barbara feel at home. Like, what I mean? So it's like, so maybe Barbara needs to hear Amazing Grace every now and again. Maybe. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's a way of really being able to emerge, listen to, connect with the people of your community, and really creating a space for the people there, not necessarily just for, I guess, one type of people or one way. And I feel like
you're right.
You're
exactly right. Yeah. And I think that's, like you said, there's a balance that we have to find. But please understand that in that position finding, if you walk into a church and they haven't quite found it yet, make sure we have some grace for them.
Yeah. Go somewhere else.
I find that, and a lot of times that there's not a lot of grace for the church or for Christians in some settings. And I know you've experienced this in a different way. There's already a preconceived idea as to what's going to happen, who you are, what you're going to do, how you're going to respond, whatever it is. And so when you come in, I mean, that's what's waiting for you is the response to whatever they think is going to happen. And so depending on how you enter the room or how you come into the place or how you're received, or if you're in the church setting, it all makes a difference.
Yeah. I mean, I think that'd be useful, right? It'd be useful for us to be able to provide a little bit of grace, even if it's splintered grace. It might even just be better for you. Like, because me being pissed off at you doesn't really probably affect you all that much.
Exactly.
Like, I'm the one who's getting robbed of the potential. I mean, there are times when you need to be like, okay, that's not cool, that's not cute, I need to leave. But there also might be times that it might be like, you know what, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna let this get in the way of like all this other stuff that's good.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
It's like, if I have to eat these green beans to get ice cream afterwards, that's what I'm going to do.
That's right. That's exactly right. We eat a lot of green beans. Yeah. I keep reminding myself, again, little sound bites that I've gotten over the years. When I walk into a place, and even if I've not been greeted well, I keep saying, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. Because my life isn't about me. It's about the people around me and how I can be loving and kind and generous and grace to those people around me.
Yeah.
And so it's been a long time figuring that out.
Yeah, I hear that. One of the things that kind of came to mind that I think really speaks a lot to potentially this particular situation, as well as I think just in general, kind of when we're talking about like even some of the political issue, climate and pop culture kind of issues right now. We've all heard of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have done unto you, right?
Yep.
But that I feel like that's it's kind of self-centered and self-serving. Like I like the idea of do unto others as they would have done unto them, right? So, I mean, but what that does is that takes you asking them what it is that they want or what it is that they need. That takes you getting out of yourself and really being present to somebody else. And maybe that is, I mean, and then that plays out into like using the pronoun that somebody wants you to use, regardless of what you think about it or their name, or to, I don't know, eat their food, because that's what you do when you go into somebody's home and they offer you food, like like those sorts of things are ways that we can, because kind of like the language of love, right? It's like, if I show up to you with and give you the love in the way that I like love, you might not feel love.
That's true.
But if I know what it is, if that makes you feel love or connect that I love you, then I am actually connecting with you in a way in which I want to. Like if I want you, you know what I mean? We've talked a little bit about the love languages. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, the love languages?
Oh, we can. I've learned, especially in my marriage and with my kids, that each one of us have a different love language. And it's very important that we meet folks at their love language. Now, I'm not smart enough to figure this out all by myself. I read a book years ago by Gary Chapman called the five love languages. And it helped me so much to especially interact with my daughters. I have 4, and my husband. And what I found out is that if I could, understand my own love language, because that's usually how I reach out to other people, just like you said. I use my love language to reach out to other people, and they may or may not receive that as love. I'll give you an example. I'm married to an incredible guy that is not romantic. He's not sentimental. He doesn't care about gifts. Those are all my love languages. So, but what he does love is time and tasks. So if I will go out when my husband's doing something on the car and bring him a glass of iced tea, that's just like me telling him I love you. If I sit with him on the couch while he's doing whatever it is he's doing or watching whatever he's doing and read my book, if I'm sitting next to him, that's me telling him I love you.
Right.
So it's an inconvenience for me sometimes, but it's telling him I love you. So it's understanding those things. I think that it also gives me the ability to surrender my preferred love language and to be open to some other types of interactions. Because when my husband says thank you, he's telling me he loves me. Right. When my husband says, will you sit with me while I watch TV? That's my husband telling me he loves me. Although it's not bringing me roses and not being romantic and having candles at dinner. But those are those things. So I found that be very helpful for me and
I mean, I think I know, like for me, it's like if I really want to have relationships with like people or with certain people in my life, then I need to try to figure out how I can really communicate that to them in a way in which they hear it and they understand it. And then how I think the other aspect though is being able to say to that person that you're in love with or that you want to exchange love with is that, hey, I'd love it if you bought me roses, like every now and again, because like it just makes me feel really good and just gives me this little like thing that you notice that I'm here. And I know that you do, but it's just this thing that I like, and then if that person can then do it, then that's great. But if we don't communicate those things, then we don't, it's so funny because like I'm saying all this shit, like, like I do it and I got it all figured out, but it's like, it's one of those things, like, I believe like we tell people what we need to hear. And, I have like you and my relationship is like gold star, right?
Yeah.
But like there are so many other parts of my relationships where I'm not happy because you ain't showing up in the way I want you to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
instead of just being like, hey, so this person, how will they know? How will they know that I care?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want them to care about me, and I want them to know that I do care, and trying to figure out, okay, how do I address it that way rather than trying to force I mean, it's only just going to help me have a better experience
Yeah. You're exactly right.
with everything.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, relationships are just like a really big thing for me right now. I'm realizing more and more that like I've always been a very driven, ambitious person, and I've gotten to do a lot of things in my life, and I've focused on a lot of my work, and at the price of sacrificing a lot of relationships and depth within relationships. And there was a part of me that knew that that was happening all along, but I was willing to sacrifice it, not really knowing what it was I was sacrificing.
Mm.
Now I'm at a
Yeah.
point in my life where I'm feeling the results of that sacrifice, and so that's something that I'm trying to be really mindful, because I do feel like called to get busy again and get active and do all this really great stuff. But I also I want to be in relationship, and I want to be in deeper relationship with people who have always been in my life, and as well as hopefully new people.
Yeah.
You know, like she wants to get I want to get a lover. I want to get a date. Like, just putting it out there, you know, not for
Yeah.
anyone who's listening, but just like in general, I'm just putting it out in the universe, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny. I got a feeling that you're not the only one who is realizing some of the things that they've lost over time because of all these things that we think are so important in the moment.
I'm not the only one.
Yeah, I'm
Are
sure.
you sure?
I'm sure. I'm pretty sure.
Right. I know. Well,
But yeah.
we are coming up on just like a few more minutes at
Oh
that
wow.
hour mark.
Man, it goes by quick.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it goes by really quick. I'm so appreciative of all these folks.
Yeah, there are so many like new folks commenting this week that I haven't seen comment before, as well as some folks that have been here before.
Yeah.
Hello to Angel and Misty. I don't think we said hello to you yet, as well as Julius and Phyllis, if we didn't say hello to you either. Thank you so much for joining us today. How should we close this out? Or
I don't know.
Do you have any like wise words or?
No, I don't actually. Just I want to encourage everybody to live your best life, and don't let the crazy of our culture and the challenge of someone's opinion about you, or the negative opinion you may have about someone else, dictate your peace today.
Yeah, that word. I mean, or not. I mean, like, like you're gonna have. You know what? I mean, I'm just saying, like, in the sense of like, you can choose not to, and then,
you can.
and then what? It's like, you know, it's like I have to remind myself that like I don't have to do this alone, as in life or most things, but I often choose that. You know, I often still choose or act as if that's the truth. That's something I'm wanting to do different.
Yeah.
But we have to really like we actually really have to do it. Like we can't just say it or talk about it. I actually have to do something different if I want to get different results. And it's hard to figure out how to do things different. Because if I would have known how to do it different, I would have done it already. You know?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think now's a good time to let everyone know that we want to make sure that our time with you guys is relevant. That what we're sharing is something that is helpful to you as much as possible. So if there are things that you want to ask about, for me, being Christian, being married for 20 years, being a grandma at a young age, having amazing kids, adult kids and young kids. I mean, I'm open to answering whatever questions that you may have. In addition to the questions that you have about how Duane and I grew up and got disconnected and reconnected. Because I think there's healing in sharing and in testimony. And be prepared that if I answer your question, that it brings up a response to you, I want you to share it. And I want us to be able to have an open conversation, because I think there's healing for both of us in that.
Mm-hmm.
So just I encourage you to do that. And even when we're not live, send us some information. We'll bring it up on air so that we can talk about it in community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I would just echo that and encourage that, because it just helps us encourage us as well, and direct us on our weeks and what to do next or not. We just got notice today that we're on iHeartRadio as well.
Yay!
So if some of you guys are watching us like on a video because you tuned in at 10:30 on Monday, which is when we go live every week, or maybe you're coming across this video in your Facebook feed or YouTube feed at some point throughout the week, if you'd like to, you could subscribe to us on either a YouTube page or click the notification and we'll notify you every time we go live. Or if it's maybe easier for you to consume us, to listen to us, then you can find us on a podcast that you can listen to us on your way to work or while you're doing the dishes or whatever. So you can just search for Splintered Grace on pretty much any podcast platform that you're on, and you can find us and you'll get notified whenever we have new information. As well as you can learn about a queer chaplain, which is like a side gig that I'm doing that I have interviewed drag queens and we've talked about their spirituality. And I'm getting ready to do a series where I'm interviewing faith leaders. And then we'll be doing sex and spirituality conversations as well. So if those things interest you, find a queer chaplain. I think we should probably say goodbye. Do you think, Tina?
You're ready. All right, everyone, have a fabulous week. Bye.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks so much. And cue the closing thing. Splintered Grace Podcast is brought to you by a queer chaplain. Follow us on all of our social medias, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at a queer chaplain. Listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, comment, like, and share. Feel free to tip us at Venmo, Bonnie Violet, and support monthly on Patreon. The song is original by Steven Sandnoff, The Chasm Between Us. Rest in peace, Steven.